How are you guys doing? Today is Thursday, March 25th, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite profile on Kyle Lowry, the elite starting point guard for the Toronto Raptors. Today, he actually turns 35, and with this profile, I plan to let his accolades, achievements, accomplishments, and stats speak for him, as I believe he stands out from other players in the NBA as one of the elite, even at 35 years old. If you're unfamiliar with Kyle Lowry, he stands at about 6 foot. Like, he's pretty short for an NBA player. He's like 196 pounds. He's pretty stocky. He's pretty thick. Don't think into that one too much. He's a very good ball handler. He's an amazing shooter. And the fact that he is, like, the average NBA player is over half a foot taller than him, and he actually is able to consistently be an all-star and a main contributing player for a team that most recently won a championship should say more than enough. But with that, I'm just going to jump right into what makes into how Kyle Lowry got from where he was and to where he is right now. So he would get a start in Philly. He's originally from Philly. Come up through the Philadelphia high school system. He would eventually go and play at Villanova. Like, he would stay in the city of Philly until he actually had to leave. Loved the city. He would go to play with Jay Wright, because that's how long Jay Wright has been at Villanova, since 2001. But Kyle Lowry, with his first season, in his freshman season, would be the very first season that Villanova would make March Madness under Jay Wright. And in the season alone, Kyle Lowry would probably average about 7.5 games, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and just over a steal, as he was named to the Big East All-Rookie team. He would only get 3 starts in the 24 games that he would play, but he would see his minutes increase in his sophomore season after his freshman season would end to Villanova getting knocked out in they got knocked out in the Sweet 16, and then the very next year they would be named a number 1 seed under Kyle Lowry, as Kyle Lowry in his second season would be named, or he would average 11 points, 4.3 rebounds, 3.7 assists, and just over 2 steals a game, as he was Villanova's go-to guy. He went on to make the second team All Big East, and this is when they changed conferences, but still they would end up losing in the Elite Eight with Jay Wright as the number 1 seed. So that's where they were in about 2005, 2006, and Kyle Lowry was the main player on those teams. He had established himself as a good enough player, especially at Villanova, to get his jersey retired like last year. And he also established himself as a good enough prospect at the college level after 2 years of college, to be taken with the 24th overall pick in the 2006 draft by the Memphis Grizzlies. And the 2006 NBA draft, this is the one that included LaMarcus Aldridge, Brandon Roy, Rajon Rondo, JJ Redick, for a few names. And like I said, he would get his start in Memphis, and it would be kind of a rocky start, but he would eventually find his way. In 2006, 2007, in his age 20 season, he would only play 10 games for a Memphis Grizzlies team that would win only 22 games on the season, following Mike Miller's 6th Man of the Year season. That this year, he would only average about 17.5 minutes, 5 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, just over a steal, and all while shooting 36% from the field. 37% from 3, high percentage from 3 from the field goal, by the way. And then he also shot 89% from the free throw line. Not much to make of his rookie season, but his numbers were pretty good, and I guess they did have the signs that he was going to get better. Going on to his next season, into his age 21 season, he earned his full way onto the roster. He started 9 of the 82 games that he would play. He would be a partial starter, but he did play all the games for the Memphis Grizzlies in 2007-2008, a season where they finished with the second worst record in the West, with the same 22-60 record they had the year before. But in the season, Kyle Lowry would average 8 more minutes per game. You'd see his points per game rise from 5.6 to 9.6. He'd see his rebounds stay at about 3. His assists jump from 3.2 to 3.6. His steals drop from 1.4 to 1.1. His field goal percentage went up from 36 to 43 as he was starting to take 3.5 more shots a game. His 3-point percentage went down from 37 to 25, as of course he took he was averaging more shots per game. And he also went on to shoot 69% from the free throw line. Not the best season, but you could see progress building from that year to this. And this would transition into his third season in his age 22 season in 2008-2009. He would play 49 games for the Grizzlies, starting 21 of them. He probably averaged about 7.6 points per game in that stretch. And then he would get traded at the deadline to Houston, and then he would finish the 2008-2009 season with Houston, and in that season they would finish with the 5th best record in the West, as they would end up beating the Trailblazers in the first round, and then they lost to the Lakers in the conference semis. And this would be the season, I believe, they went on to beat the Boston Celtics, and Kobe got his next championship. So they had to go through Kyle Lowry and the Rockets. Kyle Lowry was coming off the bench for the Rockets, but he was still one of the main contributors on that team, as for that season, he would average about 22 minutes per game. He would see his points per game drop from 9.6 to 7.6. His rebounds dropped from 3 to 2.5. His assists stayed at exactly 3.6. His steals dipped below 1. His field goal percentage stayed at about 43%. His 3-point percentage stayed at about 25%. And then from the free throw line, his free throw percentage jumped up from 69 to about 80%. And then the very next year would be the last year in which he's never started a game in the NBA. In 2009, 2010, he would start 0 games to play 68 games. He would start 0, but play 68 games for a Houston Rockets team that would finish with the 9th best record in the West. This is when Aaron Brooks got the most improved player, but they finished with a 42-40 record, 11 less wins than the previous season. This season, Kyle Lowry would average 24 minutes per game, 3 more minutes than the year prior. He would average 9 points per game, a 1.5 increase from the year before, averaging 3.6 rebounds, an increase from 2.5 the year before. He averaged 4.5 assists, which is an assist more than he did the year before, all while shooting 39% from the field, 27% from 3, and then shooting 82% from the line. All of which I got except for free throw percentage. They went up from so his free throw percentage went up from 80%. And this would all transition into his next year, where, of course, the Rockets would not make the playoffs either. In 2010, 2011, he would become a starter, starting 71 of the 75 games in a season where the Rockets would finish with the 9th best record again. They had one more win than the previous season. They had a 43-39 season. And Kyle Lowry's first season as a starter, which, of course, would come in his 5th season in the NBA, in his age 24 season. He would see his minutes per game increase by 10. He's averaging 34 minutes per game. His points went up from 9 to 13.5. His rebounds went up from 3.6 to 4.1. His assists went up from 4.5 to 6.7. His steals went up from 0.9 to 1.4. So, you can see him becoming a well-rounded point guard in the NBA, all while shooting 42% from the field, a big increase from 39.7 the year before. He went from shooting 27% in 2010 to shooting 42% in 2011. This would be the first year he shot. Well, I'm messing up. He went on to shoot 37% from 3, which is still a 10% increase from the year before. And then he would go on to shoot 76% from the line. This is the only decrease you'd see, but I think that would naturally come with an increased volume of scoring. And after the Rockets missed the playoffs, of course, it's a transition into Kyle Lowry's last season with the Rockets. In 2011, 2012, he would start 38 of the 47 games he would play in a season where the Rockets would finish with the 9th best record for the 3rd year in a row. But this time with the shortened NBA season, they would fall just short and miss it. But in this season, Kyle Lowry in his age 25 season, he would see his points per game increased from 13.5 to 14.3 as he played about 2 less minutes per game. His rebounds went up from 4.1 to 4.5. His assists stayed at about 6.6. His steals hovered at about 1.6, increasing slightly. Field goal percentage dropped from 42 to 41. His 3-point percentage staying at about 37 actually, and then his free throw percentage jumping up from 76 to 86 in his last year with Houston. And he would leave Houston for Toronto in 2012. And before he had joined Toronto, he wasn't an all-star. He was just barely a starter. And I mean, he was slowly finding his way in this league. But one thing was sure, he could actually kind of shoot from all levels. Field goal, that would be tricky considering he's very short, or for an NBA player, but he would end up getting a lot better. And you could see and his Toronto career, it pretty much shaped his entire legacy and how people view him. And he joined them when he was about 26. So in his age 26 season, his first season with Toronto, he would start 52 of the 68 games in a season where the Toronto Raptors would finish with the 10th best record in the East, as they missed the playoffs, of course, for the previous 4 seasons as well, but they were getting a little bit better. They had gone on to win 11 more games in the previous season, so they were slowly but surely turning into a little bit of a better team. And of course, they had DeRozan. In his first season, he would see his points per game drop from what they were in Houston. He also averaged 3 less minutes per game, or 2 less minutes a game, averaging about 30. He would see his points drop from 14.3 to 11.6. He would see his rebounds go up slightly to 4.7. His assists dropping from 6.6 to 6.4. His steals dropping from 1.6 to 1.4. Field goal percentage dropping from 40.9 to 40.1. His 3-point percentage dropped from 37.4 to 36.2. And then his free throw percentage dropped from 86.4 to 79.5. And of course, a lot of that comes with joining a new team. Naturally wasn't named an all-star, and they didn't make the playoffs. But the next year, ever since Kyle Lowry has been a full-time starter for the team for a full season, good things have mainly happened for the team for the teams that he started for. In 2013, 2014, in his age 27 season, in his second season with Toronto, he would start all 29 games in a season where, or all 79 games in a season where the Toronto Raptors finished with the 3rd best record in the Eastern Conference with a 48-34 win. That they basically flipped their record from last year. They were 34-48 last year. They won 14 more games. And of course, within this season, Kyle Lowry would miss the All-Star game for the last time. This would be the last season he wasn't an All-Star. He would average 17.9 points, 4.7 rebounds, 7.4 assists. His points went up, obviously, from 11.6 to 17.9. He also averaged 7 more minutes a game, the first time he ever averaged 36 minutes per game in his career. He'd also see his assists increase from 6.4 to 7.4. He increased his assists by 1 a game. He stayed at about 1.5 steals a game yet again. He see his field goal percentage jump up from 40 to 423, or 42.3%. He'd see his 3-point percentage jump up from 36.2 to 38%, and then you'd see his free throw numbers jump up a little bit to 81%. Even though Lowry didn't make an all-star game, he was a very big part of the Raptors making the playoffs. And in their first season, they would lose to the Nets in their in the first round. But they were still they were still trying to find their identity as a team, and they were slowly but surely getting better. But they had to take a little bit of a step back in the playoffs next year. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So jumping into Kyle Lowry's very first All-Star season with Toronto, in his 3rd season with them, he would play all 70 games in 24-15, a season where they would finish with the 4th best record in the East, as they had 1 more win than the year before. Lou Williams would win 6th Man of the Year while on the Raptors this year as well. In his first All-Star season, Lowry would see his minutes decrease a little from 36 to 34, but he'd keep his points at about 17.8, what they were about the year before. His rebounds were at 4.7, what they were at a year before. His assists were at 6.8. a little bit of a dip from what they were a year before, and he saw his steals hover at about where they were at about 1.6. His field goal percentage dropped from 42 to 41%, not a big drop. His 3-point percentage dropped from 38 to 33, which is still impressive to shoot 33.8% from three. And then he also went on to drop his free throw percentage slightly from 81 to 80.8%. He still went on to make the playoffs. And this year, I think the Raptors got swept by the Wizards in the first round in 2015. But this would transition to a season where after this, Kyle Lowry has never lost in the first round, or after 2015. Since 2015, Kyle Lowry has not lost in the first round of the playoffs. And in the second half of the 2010s, you'd really start to see Kyle Lowry become the player that we see today. So in 2015-16, in what would be his fourth season with Toronto, and up until then would be his 10th season in the league. In his age 29 season, he would start all 77 games for a Toronto Raptors team that would finish with the second best record in the Eastern Conference. They had 56 wins. They were 56-26, which up until then was the most wins that the Raptors had ever won in their franchise history. And they would, of course, secure a playoff spot with the second seed. In the season, Kyle Lowry would see his minutes per game increase from 34.5 to 37. So he was actually starting to get like serious all-star minutes. He saw his points per game increase from 17.8 to 21.2, the first time he's ever averaged 20 points per game in the league. He also saw his rebounds per game stay at about 4.7 for the fourth year in a row. His assists were about 6.4. He averaged 2.1 steals, the only time he's ever averaged 2 steals a game in the NBA to date. He shot 42.7% from the field, averaging a career high 15.6 shot attempts per game. He also went on to shoot 38% from three and 81% from the line, as he was able to lead Toronto to yet another playoff run as he made his second straight All-Star team. And he would also be named, in 2016, he would also be named to the All-NBA third team for the only time in his career. Just to give a little bit of context, he was named a top 15 player in the NBA, leading the Raptors to the playoffs, where they would eventually beat the Pacers in the first round. They beat them in 7. Then they beat the Heat in the conference semis when the Heat no longer had LeBron. And then they ended up losing to the Cavaliers in 2015-16. They lost by 6. Or they lost in 6 in the conference finals. And this was the year that LeBron, Kyrie, and the Cavs would come back from being down 3-1 and beat the Golden State Warriors. For a little bit more of context, but Kyle Lowry led the Raptors and DeMar DeRozan. They helped lead the Raptors from being swept in the first round the previous year to being 2 games away from the NBA Finals. So, of course, Kyle Lowry made a very big jump in 2015-2016. So after this, of course, the expectations were he set the bar incredibly high for himself, and this would lead into his third All-Star season, his age 30 season in 2016-17. He would start all 60 games for a Raptors team that would finish with the third best record in the East. They had 5 less wins than this year before. They had a 51-31 record, but in that season, Kyle Lowry would average the most amount of minutes he's ever averaged in a game. He averaged 37.4 minutes a game. He would average a career high in points, 22.4, which is an increase from what he had the year before. He would finish with 4.8 rebounds per game, which is roughly what he was averaging the whole time. He averaged 7 assists, which is the second time in his career he's ever averaged 7 assists in a full season. He averaged 1.5 steals, which is a drop from what he had before when he had 2. All while shooting about 15 shots a game. He increased his field goal percentage from the year before, making 46.4% of his shots as opposed to 42.7. He increased his three-point percentage from 38 to 41, the first and the only time thus far in his career he's ever shot 41% from 3. And then from the foul line, he shot about 82%, 81.9, which up until then was the third highest free throw percentage he'd ever shot in a season. But you could see him kind of rounding out. And once he hit 3 All-Stars by the age of 31. And once they made the playoffs, they would end up beating the Bucks in the first round. And this was like right in the beginning of the Giannis domination. And they would end up losing in the semis. They got swept by the Cavaliers, and then they would see themselves fall out the playoffs again, second year in a row, losing to the same team. But of course, LeBron James and Kyrie Irving are so good. But this is the year that they ended up going to the finals, and they got swept by the Warriors when the Warriors first signed KD. So following his third All-Star season, in which he got the Raptors to the conference semis, but they got swept, Kyle Lowry would transition to his age 31 season, where he would make his fourth consecutive All-Star game, starting 78 games for a Raptor team that would end up with the best record in the Eastern Conference for the first time in his career and the first time in Toronto Raptor history. They won 8 more games than the previous year. They had a 59-23 record. That is the best record in Toronto Raptors history. Dwayne Casey was named Coach of the Year. This was also his last year with the team. Yeah, I'm not trying to get into that right now. But in that season, Kyle Lowry, he would see his minutes drop from 37 to 32. You'd see, and with that, a good amount of his stats or at least his points would drop at the least. He dropped from 22.4 points to 16.2. His rebounds jumped up from 4.8 to 5.6. His assists stayed at about 7. His steals dropped from 1.5 to 1.1. From the field, his field goal percentage dropped from 46 to about 42, 43 to what it was the year before. He shot 46. His three-point percentage dropped to 39.9%. The second highest 3-point percentage he's ever put up in his career. And then he also shot 85% from the foul line. Up until then, that's the second highest he'd ever shot. And once the Raptors went on to make the playoffs, they beat the Wizards in the first round by 6, a team that swept them before, but they ended up getting swept by the Cavs for the second year in a row. And of course, many people were making a lot of jokes about them. This would be the last year that DeMar DeRozan was on the team, because after this season was over, they would move DeMar DeRozan and Jakob Poeltl along with a draft pick to the San Antonio Spurs for Kawhi Leonard for the last year of Kawhi Leonard's contract, and Kawhi Leonard would spend the last year of that Spurs contract in Toronto. And in that season, Kyle Lowry would make his 5th All-Star game in a row in his age 32 season. He started all 65 games in a season where the Raptors would end up with the second best record in the East. They won 1 less game than the year before. Pascal Siakam was named the most improved player this year, or he was named it in 2018, 2019. And in this season, you'd see Kyle Lowry increase he'd increase his minutes up to 34. With Kawhi Leonard on the team, he would see his points drop from 16.2 to 14.2. His rebounds dropped a little bit too, from 4.7 to 4.2, or from 5.6 to 4.8. Sorry, reading different numbers. And then he would see his assist increase to the highest it's ever been. His assist went from 6.9 to 8.7. Which is the highest assist total he's ever put in a season. He averaged 1.4 steals, which is roughly what he averaged. He averaged 0.5 blocks, a career high in blocks that year, all while shooting 41% from the field, 34% from 3, and 83% from the line. All about average compared to for what he was doing at that point in his career. Field goal percentage a little low, but I imagine still being that short and seeing your quickness kind of go under you, that I can see that feeding into it. But he was still playing incredibly. Once they made the playoffs, the Raptors with Kawhi Leonard and Marc Gasol, because they had a really good team, they ended up beating the Magic in the first round, and they beat them in 5. They beat the Sixers in 7, and this is the year where Kawhi Leonard hit probably one of the most clutch shots you'd ever see. Like that shot was hanging up there, and then it finally fell in. They beat the Bucks. They beat Giannis and the Bucks in the semifinals in 6, and then they ended up beating the Golden State Warriors in the NBA Finals in 6. And this would be a season where, of course, I think Steph Curry was the only healthy one. I know KD was out because he virtually he partially tore his Achilles, and then he fully tore it that game. Klay Thompson went out. But they were the Warriors were definitely outmatched, but there's still no excuses in the game. the Raptors most definitely outplayed them. Kyle Lowry played his part, and looking at how he played in his only finals, or for the playoffs himself, he averaged 14 points, 4.7 rebounds, 6.4 assists, 1.2 steals. So I mean, you could see him just slowly building up into, like, this was the time for him to step up for the Toronto Raptors franchise and become a legend, and he actually did that. He did what he needed to do, and the Raptors brought home their very first and thus far their only NBA championship in Kawhi Leonard's only year there. Kyle Lowry's been the starting point guard the whole time. And then after Kawhi Leonard would leave Toronto after his only year there and go to Los Angeles, Kyle Lowry was the only remaining all-star going into the 2019-2020 season for Toronto, and he would end up missing about 24 games. He would start 58 games in a season where the Raptors would end up with the second best record in the East with a 53-19 record after the NBA season got shortened due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 disease. And they had to stop the season in the very middle, and they decided to end. They decided they were going to end it in Orlando. This is when they had the bubble in Disneyland. And with Kyle Lowry only starting about 58 of those games, and with Kawhi Leonard gone, this caused players like Pascal Siakam to step up, and Pascal Siakam went on to be named an All-Star, and now Pascal Siakam and Kyle Lowry were the two All-Stars on the Raptors this season. And after Kawhi left, you'd see Kyle Lowry's minutes increased by about 2 of them. He played 36 minutes a game. This season, you see his points increase from 14.2 to 19.4, the third highest points per game total he'd ever put up in his career. His rebounds will stay at about 5, which is about the second highest he'd ever put up in his career. He averaged 7.5 assists, which is the second most he'd ever put up in his career. He averaged 1.4 steals per game, which is roughly what he was doing every season. You'd see his field goal percentage remain at about 41%, 35% at 3, which is what it was the year before, and his free throw percentage went up from 83 to 86. And once the Raptors made the playoffs in the bubble, they would go on to sweep the Nets in the first round, and they would end up losing in the conference semis to the Celtics. And this is when Nick Nurse was named the coach of the year, because they gave it to him retroactively for beating the Warriors and for helping the Raptors put together a really good season without Kawhi. But after all this, after they lost to the Celtics in the semifinals, I guess this would transition us into Kyle Lowry's current season, the first season since 2013-14 where he wasn't named an All-Star in the East. And of course, a big part of that could be due to players like James Harden moving out to the East Coast and playing the same position, players like Trae Young kind of coming up underneath him, Zach LaVine, Jaylen Brown, younger players playing in the backcourt. But so far this season, he's played 37 games for a Toronto Raptors team that is currently sitting 11th in the Eastern Conference. They started off really well, but they lost 9 of their last 10 games. To give a sense of where they sit, they sit a game or just to look where they are in the play. They sit 3 games out of the playoff picture, as they sit 13 games behind the first place 76ers at this very moment in the season. But Kyle Lowry, in the 37 games he's played, he's averaging 17.4 points, which is roughly what he's been doing since he's been an All-Star. He's averaging 5.6 rebounds a game, which is tied for the highest rebounds per game he's ever averaged in a season. He's averaging 7.5 assists per game this season, which is tied for the second most assists he's ever put up in a season, averaging just over a steal per game, all while shooting 44% from the field, which is higher than he shot the last few seasons. He's shooting 39% from 3, higher than he shot the last couple of seasons as well, and he's shooting 88% from the foul line, which up until now is the highest free throw percentage he's ever shot from the line in his entire career. And you can just see that his field goal, his shooting from the field is getting a lot better. And as of right now, for the 2021 year, I believe that Kyle Lowry has enough talent and he has the resume to stand out from other point guards, other players in this league. And with this said, I mean, Kyle Lowry if we're looking at where Kyle Lowry is now, he is a starting point guard who's won a championship, At one point in his career, at his very best, he was named a top 15 player in the NBA. He's made 6 of the last 7 All-Star games, and the one he didn't make was this most recent one. And not to mention, he did win gold with Team USA in Rio for the Olympics. So, I mean, with that, I mean, and his jersey's retired at his alma mater, Villanova, and the dude's only 6 feet tall. So, I mean, with that said, I think that should be enough for just for why I believe he is an elite player. And with that said, I want to wish Kyle Lowry a happy 35th birthday. As once again, today is March 25th, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims. I want to thank you once again for listening to all 30 minutes of this piece. If you ever get a chance, check out Kyle Lowry. As of today, he is wearing number 7 for the Toronto Raptors, the team that, of course, he has established his entire career with. He might as well have walked off the court last night with the Raptors. That might have been his last game as a Raptor. He's been in the middle of a lot of trade talks, so who's to know what team he's going to be on next? But I'm pretty sure he's happy that for his birthday, he's going to be a Toronto Raptor. With that said, I'm James Sims. Once again, thanks for listening to all 31 minutes of this piece. I hope all is well, and peace out. Thanks for being a part of the journey.